there's really three things that matter most. It's speed, how quickly can I get an alert out. Reach is what we've been talking about, right? It's hitting as many targets as possible, making sure that no matter where people are, we can get them. And urgency is that idea of that intrusive audio, right? Breaking through the clutter, making sure that we know when we hear that sound, when we see those flashing lights, when it's repeating over and over again, I know this is a serious situation. Welcome. Thanks for coming. So what I'm going to do here, if either of you rolling in wouldn't mind, I'm going to try to do a interactive demonstration, show you what the software can do. If anyone has their mobile phone on them and can start up a text to this number here, just text #demo and send it. I'll populate you into my guest group and we'll make this a little interactive so you can see what it's like to receive some alerts, and alerts that have a handful of variables attached to them as well, because there's going to be times where the desire is to send one alert to a specific place and a completely different one to other places. You can imagine locking down one building and then alerting everyone around that building to stay away. We don't want to send everyone to lockdown because you're going to give people the wrong idea if they're in a different building. But we still want them to know something's going on. So I'll give you a little flavor of how that's accomplished, because the more variables you have in these types of situations, the harder it is for the sender, right? And we want to make sure that the sender has a very easy way to trigger an alert that might have some complicated variables around it. So did I do enough filibustering here to give you both a chance to jump in? Okay,
I think so.
Great. Well, just by way of introduction, and thanks for jumping in the session here today. My name is Mike Payne. I work for a company called Singlewire Software. Our product is called Informacast, but you'll often hear the two used synonymously. Home base is Madison, Wisconsin. We've actually been doing this since 2001, believe it or not. Our very first customer was the Department of Commerce after 9/11. They realized we don't have the means to evacuate our building in any reasonable amount of time, so they actually had just purchased a brand new Cisco phone system and said, hey, why can't we get alerts on these things? We developed software that was able to send these alerts to the phones, and that was, we thought the panacea. And a lot's changed, right? The world has changed, technology's changed. We've enhanced greatly what we do. About 7,000 customers in 50 countries now. Really across the board, though, what it comes down to is we provide mass notification solution, but it's ultimately about keeping students safe, keeping staff safe if it's a private entity. I cover a region. My role is a regional sales manager, so I cover the Midwest region, which is 10 states in the Midwest, all of Canada, and all of our FedGov business. So we have customers that range from small K-12s out in the middle of nowhere, Manitoba, Canada. Informacast is sending an alert on that. All things in between is what we do. So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about, from my perspective, I've been doing this for 5 years now. I talk to people every day, multiple times a day, and for me, it's about understanding the challenges that you all face as it relates to how do I implement a solution that, heaven forbid something happens in my district, I have the means to get the proper communication out, right? So what I've observed, this is going to be my observations, and this is also going to be, a lot of this session is going to be around what we have a segment of our company known as customer care, who goes through a process with our customers that talks about how do you plan for these types of things. It's one thing to have the software, but how do you actually plan for how you're going to use it? Everyone's going to use it a little bit differently, right? It's based on what's unique to you, what's unique to your environment, et cetera. So we'll go through that stuff, and I'll do a quick demonstration as well to show you what we can do. Probably not a big surprise. These are the standard use cases that we really see across the board. Everything from how do I manage disparate systems? I'm adding IP speakers over here, and I've got a legacy paging system over there. How do I get the two to talk to each other? Just to manage that type of communication, all the way up to how do I alert in the event of an active shooter, right? Or inclement weather. Those are the types of problems that we're solving through our software. And that's what we are, we're a software. So we're there to combine, or to sort of meld all of these disparate endpoints or targets together to give you one overall solution, and we'll talk a little more about what that means. So I'm not going to belabor a lot of this stuff. You're probably well aware that the trends as it relates to emergency alerting, school safety is continuously an ongoing challenge, right, for people like you to manage. Notification systems aren't just paging systems anymore, right? There are means to actually alert in the event of an emergency. Mobile alerting has become a very popular means of communicating, right? But there's a lot of gaps there. It shouldn't be your only means of communication. And to give you just a small example, I know it's going to sound silly when I say this, but if a student went over or a teacher went over and pulled the fire alarm, would it be enough for us to send everyone a text and just a text on the mobile phone? No, we need a way to tell them something's going on, right? What we call intrusive audio. But mobile is certainly important, but it's not and shouldn't be your only solution to alert en masse. There's too many other things going on in ways we can miss that. So here's what I view as the biggest challenges, and Ricky already gave me two of them just talking before a couple of you came in. The biggest challenge I see, of course, is a rise in school violence, up 113% year over year. That's a crazy statistic. Students and staff are increasingly mobile, right? They're all over the place, open campuses. How do I send an effective alert knowing that I don't have the luxury of having a clue where people are going to be if and when this were to happen? So how do I plan for that? Bridging new technology with legacy technology. This is a conversation I seem to be having like crazy. And I think a lot of it has to do with grant dollars, new building construction where I don't want to put a legacy paging system in anymore. I got a new building, I want to do IP speakers, and that's great, but now guess what? That doesn't talk to my other systems, and there's times where I need to send a district-wide alert out. Well, our software and software like ours can bring those two systems together, right? So sometimes there's a challenge of, I either have to go full wholesale rip and replace, which I don't know of a single district. I think I know of one district that did it, but it also I think happens to be the district where Michael Jordan lives, and that's probably why they were able to do it. To do a full sale rip and replace, right? You have to do this in pieces, so how do you come up with a solution to keep things together in that time? Managing multiple systems, that's probably the second most common conversation I have is, hey, we've got all these things in place for mass notification, but the problem is that's 3 or 4 different systems now. One sending alerts to mobile phones, one sending alerts to my overhead speakers, one sending to desktop computers. And now, in the moment, I'm scared of how someone will actually be able to do this, right? Or, not the least of which, how we can actually support it when we've got all these other systems. And competing initiatives and ideas is probably not the best way to say that. What I mean when I say that is, I'm in the IT department and I may have a solution like Informacast or something else, and lo and behold, someone knocks on my door and says, hey, we just bought this thing and it sends texts and it does this and you need to make it work. And all the while you're like, okay, I had no input in this whatsoever, had no idea we were doing this. We already own a solution that does this, and now I've got to deal with this other one that came in because my security team saw this at a show somewhere and went out and bought it, right? We run into that a lot, right? Because now we've got other people. This isn't just an IT issue, right? IT's ultimately brought in sometimes too late to the party. It's already been purchased, make it work. That's probably one of the bigger things we see. I'm going to go over today what as I mentioned, our customer success team will go through with an existing customer of ours. And I'm doing this because I want you to understand some of the things that have to be thought about before you go and you think about or purchase a mass notification system. Most of the things you talk about will have nothing to do with technology. They have everything to do with process. What exactly has to happen? What exactly are you planning for? Those are the types of things where if your teams can identify that, then you've essentially built the blueprint for whatever system you're going to deploy. The biggest mistake I see people do is they buy the solution and they try to fit their process into that solution. It shouldn't be that way. It should be the process driving whatever solution you move forward with. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about the things that I think are important to keep in mind as your teams, your district are evaluating either how we move forward with a mass notification strategy or how we enhance what we already have. Right? Those are two common topics, and I'm seeing a lot more of the enhancement discussion because most people, as I mentioned, nowadays do have something in place. So we'll talk a little bit about why speed and reach are such an important factor. So the very first thing that we recommend our customers do, or prospective customers, or anyone looking for a mass notification solution, is identify what the situations are. A lot of them are pretty obvious, right? Maybe it's active shooter, maybe it's building lockdown, maybe it's inclement weather, maybe it's just a bell schedule. Those are the types of things that fall under the category of what is a situation. Get input from the key stakeholders. Again, don't worry about the technology. Give me the actual process. What has to happen? You will, again, build that blueprint and understand what is the best way to reach people. I work with a very large healthcare organization in the Midwest that had a very unfortunate situation outside of one of their locations. And they found out the very hard way that they did not have what they thought they had in place from a mass notification standpoint. It took an hour to actually alert all of their employees because there were so many steps in the process. One got missed and it just threw everything off for an extended period of time. Well, they did a postmortem and talked to their employees and said, how should we have communicated to you? And they thought they were going to get an answer that more aligned with, this is how my preferred means of communication, or this is what my preferred means of communication is. But that's not the answer they got. They got the answer from the person that just said, this is what I happened to be doing at the time. I was in the break room, so you'd have had to get me on the speaker. I didn't have my computer on me, my phone was at my desk. I was in between buildings. You would have had to get me on my mobile device. I was in an operating room, so you would have had to get me on the speakers in the operating room. I was at my desk. I was entering patient medical records. It dawned on them the best way to reach people is to send it to as many targets as humanly possible, because we don't know where people are going to be or what they're going to be doing. Consider what you're going to say, and different events should always warrant a different type of message, right? We always say this, and it's kind of a joke, but donuts in the break room should have a much different look, sound, and feel than an active shooter. We don't want to get this whole car alarm syndrome where people hear it and they're just numb to it because everything sounds the same, everything looks the same, and to me it's just another birthday announcement. Well, no, this time it's an active shooter. Well, I didn't know that because it sounded the same and it looked the same. Everything should look different based on what the event is, right? I always say, kind of look at this sort of as on a spectrum. How intrusive do I want to be with my intended recipients, with my targets? Well, there's a direct correlation between that and how severe the incident is, right? If it's an active shooter, I don't care what you're doing. I'm getting your attention. I'm blasting it through the speakers. I'm blowing up your computer, your phone, and throwing it up on digital signage. It's going everywhere. If it's a more benign alert, well, maybe I'm not doing that. Maybe I'm just sending a tone, something a little bit more discreet. They should look, sound, and feel different. Who needs to receive a notification is very important, right? We talked about this before, ensure no one misses a message, ensure no one misses a notification. That's critical, right? And to do that, the only way to do that is to make sure you send it to as many targets as possible. But one thing that gets missed, you'd be surprised how often it gets missed, is there's no procedure for what to do if this happens. So we send the alert out, great. No one knows what to do. You have to have your teams, generally this falls more on the emergency side of the house, security, they have to have a procedure developed. So if I hear active shooter, what do? Do I run, hide, fight? Do I run out of the building? Do I barricade myself? That has to be very specific. People need to know that. We can get the alert out all day long. What happens next? That's a policy question, right? Getting it out there and having everyone erupt into chaos is really not doing anybody any good, right? Who gets alerted first? Is it everyone? Is the alert severe? Is the event severe enough that everyone gets it? Or do we give it to a smaller group of people first so they can decide whether or not to escalate? You notice none of these questions have anything to do with technology. How is it triggered? Wireless pendants around teachers' necks, a dedicated panic button on a wall, a dedicated panic button on an IP phone, a command center interface where information is centrally disseminated or brought in, and now I can decide what to do from there. Those are all options, but those are considerations. Are we doing automated alerts? Because inclement weather is bearing down, and solutions like ours can tie into the National Weather Service or tie into camera systems that detect movement to automatically send an alert. These are all things that are open to you, but you have to define it, what's important. What devices receive it, right? We know that we can get most people on their mobile phones, but we also know we've got a problem with that. My phone's sitting upside down on the desk right now, right? How do I know? Or I'm getting 5 texts from my buddy making fun of me because my fantasy football team is horrible, and the 6th text is an active shooter. I don't know the difference between that. I just disregard the first 2 because, he's going to keep going and I'm going to ignore it. Intrusive audio is a very important component to that. Something intrusive to get your attention. Go back to that fire alarm example. I need people to know something's going on. I'm not in any way discounting the power of this, but I think it truly needs to be augmented with other means of alerting. This is an important one too. You likely have a lot of what you need already in your schools today from a mass notification standpoint. You likely have things like overhead speakers. You likely have things like digital signage. People have things like mobile devices. Those are all already there, right? Don't feel like you have to go out and buy a bunch of stuff. Instead, you can use what's already there and use the software to get to those devices as opposed to having to go out and buy a bunch of new proprietary hardware. Unless you're flush with cash, like I know most school districts are, and you can just go out and buy a bunch of new stuff, right? How is the situation managed? This is a key one as well because we can send the alert. Our individuals who have received it can now start to go through their process that they've been trained to do. What happens next is very dynamic. No one can anticipate that, right? Who knows? So the ability to bring people together is something that you should consider. We've worked with platforms like WebEx Teams and Microsoft Teams, or standing up a dynamic conference bridge so the instant an alert goes out, I'm bringing a smaller group of people together so they can collaborate. Think of it as sort of a virtual war room, for lack of a better way of putting it, right? Now I'm bringing those people together so they can do and determine what to do next. Because that's so dynamic. There is not a plan in the world that can answer that question for you. That's in the moment, right? And bringing those critical individuals together is what is going to make the difference for you. So we talked a little bit about that, right? Who are the stakeholders? What tools can we leverage? Is it a conference bridge? Is it an already existing platform that we can tie and push an alert into, like some type of an IM or collaboration space? Those are all things available to you. And then remember, it's very critical to minimize, when I mean downtime, I mean dead time. Like I sent the alert out and I haven't given any type of an update. You've got to have something, a process in place that says after a certain period of time we have to give updates. And that's where things like live audio becomes so critical. Live intrusive audio into a building. I can't plan for what's next, but if I can pick up a phone, dial a code and get to the whole building and say, hey, everybody, the threat is still active, please stay where you are. Something as simple as that, right? Just have that tool in place, or consider that, because we have to keep people somewhat updated, right? While this is happening. Otherwise, a lot of, any lack of information can only be a problem for us. So what does this look like in practice? An active shooter incident has happened, right? The notification gets sent throughout campus. It can be sent from this. It can be sent from a duress button you have, as I mentioned, discreetly underneath the desk, or even I see a lot of teachers now using wireless pendants as duress buttons. Solutions like ours can take a trigger from that and then immediately send that alert, right? You know that you're going to send it to every available device. You already have the alert ready to go with the audio and the text and a question maybe to receive real-time responses. You've sent the alert. Now your recipients of that alert are taking action. They're moving into enacting their ALICE training. They're running, they're hiding, they're fighting, they're doing whatever your district has determined is important, right, at that point. Now we're gathering in real time security personnel together, either through that conference bridge or through that collaboration platform, so others are now involved, right, immediately. I work with a lot of districts locally in Madison where we push an alert out to the local police department the instant that happens, right? There's a lockdown at the Middleton High School, right? So now they know right away and they're involved. allowing message recipients to respond. So in real time, I can view responses coming in and I can better manage this situation. Now keep in mind, I'm also in that collaboration space with that smaller group of people. I'm monitoring responses. I can better determine what to do next. But I have to be able to send the information to the right people, and I have to be able to be getting critical information back. Responses coordinated with law enforcement. Situation is contained, all clear is sent out through those same channels. Right? That, what you just read in practice, was built by those 6 bullets we just talked about, right? Identifying the situation, all those things allowed this to happen. And as you can probably imagine, everyone's gonna do this a little bit different, right? There's no set template that says, here's what you do in an active shooter, because everyone's environment's different, everyone's policies are different, everyone's procedures are a little bit different. Software like ours and many others are designed to work within the parameters of the process that's been created. And it's okay that everyone does it a little differently. That's where it should be. All right, this is gonna not be anything more than a very minor commercial, and then I'm gonna show you just an example of how our software works. And I wanna show it to you because you should love Singlewire and buy Informicast tomorrow, but just to give you a little bit of a sense for what solutions like ours can do. So how can Informicast help? What makes us a little bit unique in this world is we can tie in mobile alerts and on-prem alerts from one platform, right? There's a lot of solutions out there that do mobile. There's a handful that do on-prem alerting. We do both, right? So from one place, you can be sending out to all those different endpoints, mobile and on-prem. I'll show you that in just a second. Everything else, you can read for yourself. It can be used for a wider array of scenarios. I've got schools that use our software for nothing more than tying their disparate overhead paging systems together, managing their bells, right? So an administrator or teacher can wake up in the morning and change their bell schedule to a 2-hour delay in about 20 seconds, right? And from what I understand, there's some systems out there that, it's almost too much work to just say, just let the bells run, who cares, right? You can build out an entire bell schedule with our software, again, tying all those things together. So just to kind of go through the nuts and bolts and things that you might want to consider when you're evaluating systems is, there's really 3 things that matter most. It's speed, how quickly can I get an alert out? And that includes how easy it is for people to actually trigger it. It includes the power of the software to send it through many different channels. It includes a lot of those things. Reach is what we've been talking about, right? It's hitting as many targets as possible, making sure that no matter where people are, we can get them, right? In between buildings, in the bathroom, in the break room, in the lunchroom, right? There's different factors in each of those different places to consider. So if we can increase our reach to get as many places as possible, that would be ideal. And then urgency is that idea of that intrusive audio, right? Breaking through the clutter, making sure that we know when we hear that sound, when we see those flashing lights, when it's repeating over and over again, I know this is a serious situation. This isn't just one of those, hey, let's wish so-and-so a happy birthday today, right? All right, so here's just an example of what we generally show and talk about when we're working with our customers. This is like, think of this as your toolbox, right? Your toolkit. This is what you can do. It's not, again, designed to drive your policy, it's designed to enact your policy. So Informicast lies right in the middle as a software between triggering an event and the targets, where it needs to go, where it can go. Sending alerts to voice over IP desk phones, to computer desktops, to overhead speakers, analog or IP, to digital signage, and just about anything else that's network connected. Either directly network connected or through some piece of middleware like a simple contact closure. So when I'm sending an alert out, a lockdown, I could also be locking your doors or unlocking your doors, turning lights on outside of the building and say, don't come in, something's going on. These are all things that our software can do in an automated fashion, all the while sending out to mobile devices and then bringing those key stakeholders together in some means of collaboration, right? Interestingly enough, on the triggering side, it's probably pretty self-evident that, manual triggers are out there. We can push buttons, things like that. But the automated triggers are getting a little bit more interesting as other software is out there now. And Formacast is integrating with them. So out on the West Coast, we integrate with earthquake detection software. Software can identify an earthquake, I think 30 seconds to a minute before it happens. It can kick a trigger over to us and we can send an alert out to the entire school. So now they know to start their procedure before the earthquake hits. We work very closely with gunshot detection software. That's becoming very common. We're now starting to see a lot of vape detection software out there. And the desire, just like anything else, is to say, okay, that does a really good job of detecting what it's supposed to detect. Where it falls a little bit short is in the actual alerting side of it. So it's a quick handshake over to us, and we're then using our power of alerting to let people know. Something as simple as someone dials 911 in the district, we can recognize that and then alert any target that needs to know, hey, 911 was just dialed in high school room 225. We can even record the call to listen to later or in near real time. So it's about understanding what's going on in the environment, having a series of triggers, manual and automated, and a significant amount of targets. But again, this is just the toolkit. It's all built with what we've already talked about previously. So let me give you a couple of examples. I'm just gonna sit down here. I'm sure everyone's gonna be absolutely distraught that I'm gonna kill the PowerPoint presentation here. But sorry, I'm gonna just cancel out here. And we'll take a look at my dashboard. Actually, you know what we'll do? We'll take a look at my demo lab back in Madison, Wisconsin. And I will go back to this. You may think this is an abandoned Radio Shack, but it's not. This is actually our lab in Madison, Wisconsin. And it is an hour behind, so if that helps you believe it a little bit more. So I'm just sharing that out. I'm gonna turn up the volume here. What I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna send an alert right from my mobile phone. And I'm gonna be a member of a security team, and I'm witnessing something happening outside of the building. I met with, I think it was St. Louis Public Schools, and said, I think it was 60+% of their violent incidents that happen in the building start outside the building. So their question to me was, how do I empower people, security, to get an alert back into that building? And we can do that with the mobile app. So I'm gonna just send a lockdown alert out. And I can send it right from my mobile phone the way it's built ahead of time. It's got text, it's got audio, it's got an image, run, hide, fight. I can even record audio right into my phone and send it out. And it's not only gonna go to other mobile devices, it'll go to my on-prem devices, to my digital signage, my IP phones, my overhead speakers. So I'll do that right now. Attention, there's been a suspicious vehicle located in the south parking lot. We are now entering a lockdown. Please stay where you are and wait for the all clear. And if you want any authoritative voice work, I can do that on the side. I'm gonna send that off right now. We're gonna see that on my desktop went off. Attention, there's been a suspicious vehicle located in the south parking lot. We are now entering a lockdown. Please stay where you are and wait for the all clear. Receive it as a phone call on my mobile device as well. Attention, right? There's been a suspicious vehicle located in the south parking lot. You'll notice I get a chance to respond to it.
Please stay where you are and wait for the all clear. Please respond with one of the following. Press 1 for I need help. Press your response if I need help was successful.
Never been more true. So let's take a look at some of the things that have happened here. So I trust that a handful of you received the text that were able to opt in. So you received a text on your phone indicating that we're in a lockdown. I got this notification splashed up on my computer screen, right? Takes over the whole screen, or maybe it's even more of a partial or even a scroll on the bottom. Embedded in this alert is a live camera feed. Oh, there's the snow. See, I told you. This is a camera that points out in the back of our parking lot in our home office in Madison, and it looks like it's still snowing. but for individuals to even dial into that phone in the room and listen to what's going on as well. Right? So we're providing some of those tools. I'll show you what else has happened. I've sent alerts to those speakers you heard, as well as the digital signage, and even the IP phones have sent the audio as well as splash text on the screen of the phone. So now I've successfully sent a notification to my building, to people in the surrounding area, and I asked you to provide me some feedback. I asked you to respond, and I'm just gonna log in here quick. That was logged out. And I'll show you that as the sender of this notification, I can actually view those responses as they come in real time. So my notifications that were just sent out, the lockdown is right here. I could see that I sent 6 texts, took about a second to get there, and now the responses that have come in. I can look at the I need help and see that Mike Payne said he needed help, and one of you. Since you came in anonymously today, I only see you as your phone number. If you were a staff or a student, I'd see that instead. So now as I'm collaborating with my security team, I'm also viewing these responses in real time and determining what to do next. One of the things I also mentioned that has been a pretty prevalent challenge, especially in an environment like yours, is what happens when I have a lot of different variables. And what I mean by variables are, well, if something happens in this school, I want to alert the school, but then what else do I send to people in the surrounding area? And how do I make that instant without having to go in and send 2 different notifications, right? This is where the time and the speed comes in. So we've developed this concept, we call it scenarios-based sending. You'll notice I have the scenarios up here on my interface that I've logged into, but I also have the scenarios available to me right on my mobile device. And the way the scenarios work is I can select the event, what's happening. Well, it's a lockdown. Based on that, I can be asked a couple of questions. Well, and what are those questions? They have to be meaningful to me. I think my wireless is dying here. I'll do it on my mobile. I have a lockdown. The next question is, where is it? Well, I'm going to say it's in Hillsdale. Just a location, right? Based on that, now Informacast is going to send one notification to that building affected and another one to everyone in the surrounding area. But as a sender, all I had to do was say, there's a lockdown in Hillsdale. All of the other intelligence is already built in. It greatly increases the ability to have success when I send this alert and to simplify it. So if I just quickly hit send, here in my building,
attention, this is a lockdown. Please stay where you are and wait for the all clear.
Right? So I sent a lockdown there, but I'm in the surrounding area.
Lockdown has been issued for Hillsdale. Please stay away from the area and wait for further instruction. Please respond with one of the following. Press 1 for confirm. To hear this message, your response of confirm was successfully recorded.
So the idea behind that is I don't want to have to rely on the sender to know in this scenario, this group needs that and this group needs this. But I know they know what's happening, so they can just hit lockdown and tell me the destination, and we do the rest. So everyone in Hillsdale got that lockdown notification. Everyone in the surrounding area was told to stay away. So those are the types of things, as you start to build and think through your scenarios, those are things that you can be thinking about. Well, if we have these more complicated events, can we build logic in there that allows my senders to very easily send and disseminate information? I always recommend having a general information tab where I can just dynamically type in information. In this case, we believe the threat has been neutralized, but we remain on lockdown until further notice. I'll send that out. You guys will receive it as a text. I can receive it as a phone call too, converting the text to speech.
The threat has been neutralized, but will remain on lockdown until further notice. Please respond with one of the following. Press 1 for confirm. To hear this message again, your response of confirm was successfully recorded.
And you'll see these confirmations rolling in real time. I already gotten 2 of them, on 3 of them, one from me, one from a couple of you. So imagine now I'm in this space. I could be in a Teams space where the notification has been sent, right? There's that lockdown. I can listen to it. I could be on a conference bridge. All those things automatically happen where I've populated the alert into there. So my smaller groups are now talking and they're evaluating these responses in real time and determining what do I need to do next. All the way down to hopefully being able to issue an all clear to my entire district and buildings.
Is an all clear notification. Please resume normal activities.
Going to things like my speakers, my phones, my digital signage, even coming as a little scroll on my computer screen, right? It doesn't always have to be a full takeover. That gets into the sort of the look, feel and sound of a notification. And of course, as a phone call too, right?
Is an all clear notification.
So there's a lot that's going on there, but the key is to take a lot of that complexity out of the sender's hands so that they know if these happen, I hit this button and I answer these questions. Maybe I type in a little bit of dynamic text and a lot of things happen, right? People are being brought together dynamically. I'm sending different alerts out to different people based on the impact of this event. I'm also asking for responses in real time so my incident management team can determine what to do next. And all I had to do is click a button and answer a question or 2, right? To actually do that and have to have your wits about you in that moment to determine all of those things, you're setting yourself up for failure, right? So keep in mind that sending in what could be difficult situations is a critical thing that you want to keep in mind. And you want to make sure it's as easy as possible for the person to do that. And again, I can do it right from here as well, if I need to. All right, I think that's just about everything I was planning to show you today. I wanted to leave enough time if you had any questions or wanted to see anything. I'm happy to do that. I might just put this slide up here so you can view that. Oops, there we go. In case there's any questions, I can go back to that. So just in closing, I just want to mention, right, as you're evaluating and planning or maybe augmenting systems that you already have, keep some of these things in mind. I'm happy to share these slides with you if you want. This is just an example of what our teams will do with new customers, prospective customers, to walk them through these types of things and build out their own plan and then use the software, whatever it is you decide to use, to automate as much of that process as possible, to make it as easy as possible to do that. So I think that's all I wanted to talk about with you today. Any questions at all?
So is it customizable enough to where, like, if you push the button to lock down, like let's say at your south campus, and then your procedures at your west campus, instead of going into a lockdown, because that's not what the threat is, it's you go to a lockout to give that alert to everybody at that campus?
Yeah, absolutely. So that act of pushing the button can be very similar to the act that I showed in the command center, where knowing that it was pushed from here tells Informacast to send one alert here and another alert there. Yeah, we have a lot of customers. One I can think of, large government customer, where they've actually got a duress button on every VoIP phone in each of their meeting rooms. They can just hit that. And what we do is we send a unique notification to the security team. Well, they're big enough that they have multiple security teams. So they one team maps the different areas of the building. So we have to send it to a unique team on mobile devices, on desktops, on overhead speakers in their command center, that a duress button was pushed in, floor 3, room 225. It can be very unique. But in your situation, it could be that way as well, where I'm sending a lockdown to my building and at the same time, like you said, a lockout or a stay away to the other surrounding. Because yeah, you're right, the impacted area should be getting a different message than those that aren't directly impacted but need to be made aware nonetheless of it. Absolutely, can do that. Great question. Any other questions? Sometimes I don't get them because people are afraid I'm going to start talking again. So keep that to a minimum. Any others?
No, so obviously you've got a database of numbers and whatnot that are being maintained. We're gonna be feeding you, we're gonna interface with
Yeah.
our stuff, batch cycles, some kind of update process.
Yeah, so what's going on in the back end is if you have any sort of like LDAP-driven database that can push out a flat CSV file of that information, we can consume it on a scheduled basis, so once a day, twice a day, whatever that might be. We have a little tool, if you're using Active Directory, that can actually extract that information into CSV and then we consume it. But as long as you can push out a CSV file that we can query, we can keep all that information up to date. And what's interesting about that is it's not always just about pulling in users and their contact information. You can tag those users so we know a little bit about them. What they're tagged or what their designation is can tell us what groups to put them in. Meaning, if I now take a different role in the district and I'm working in a different building, I can just be designated as an East Building employee. As soon as you make that change in your system, we recognize it and now put that person in all the distribution lists that map to what an East employee should be receiving. So to your point, they're not getting the lockdown because it's happening in the building where they used to work, right? You can also do the same thing from a tagging standpoint that will identify to us what level of security that person should be granted. Because as you can imagine with a system like this, we don't want everyone to have the same level of access. We may want you to be able to alter your bell schedules for your school, but not anyone else's. Or your scenarios might be wildly different than someone else's based on your role in the district. So changing that tag can tell us what security designation to give that person. So maybe someone that used to be working in the IT department now takes a job with the security team. We now see them with a different designation. We give them different rights to what they can log into. So I always say, as long as you have a source of truth that you trust, then we can query off of it. If you don't, then we're only going to be as good as that.
So if that CSV file then has the number along with the student name in it, then whenever you guys get the update, or whenever we get the update that says so-and-so gave the message that they need help, or so-and-so gave the message that they need, that they're okay, instead of giving a number, it could just like give the student's name.
Right.
Okay.
When you saw those responses that came in, you saw one of them was from Mike Payne, that was me. That's because the system knows me as a user. The rest of you came in anonymously today, that's why I only saw you as a number. If they were in your system the way they would be, you'd see their names the same way you saw my name. Yeah, not just a number. Number wouldn't do you much good, right? Let's get out the decoder and figure out who that belongs to. That would save you a lot of time. So, no, really good question. Cool. Any other questions at all?
So I noticed up there it says two-way radios.
Yeah.
Like, how does that work?
So the way we get to two-way radios is very similar to how we can get to existing analog paging systems. It's one of two things. If one of two things are in play, we're in good shape. If you've made a connection between your two-way radio systems and your phone system through like an ATA or something like that, where you can dial an extension and get to those radios, we can piggyback off the same capabilities. So underneath, we're essentially dialing those numbers in DTMF tones to push our audio out there. It's the same way we can get to these analog paging systems. The other way to do it, if that connection is not made, is if there's line level audio in at the repeater level, or in the case of analog paging systems at the amp level, you can plug in a small piece of equipment called a zone controller. It's about $400-ish, I believe, last time I checked. Line level audio in, Ethernet back to the network. We see it as an IP endpoint, so it can be added to any group, right? We push it to that, it converts to analog and pumps up to whatever's downstream of it. So if you can do one of those two things, we can push the audible alerts to those two-way radios and or analog paging zones. So it's just be a matter of what it can and can't do. But we see that a lot. I mean, especially in schools, integrating with their existing paging systems is a very common thing. And again, we run into a lot of them where just the idea that they can manage it all from one place is very appealing to them. These things have all kind of been added at different times, and buildings have been renovated, and this has that and that has this. And again, now I want to add IP speakers because I have some grant money. How do I manage all that? So Does that help to answer the question,
Yeah.
Ricky?
Yeah.
And again, any of these things, I'm giving you some high-level answers. If you want to dig into them a little bit more, just let me know. I'm happy to do that. Great. Any other questions at all? Well, thank you so much for the time. I'll make sure I